For more than 3 years, one question has continued to follow the death of 25-year-old Shanquella Robinson.
It has been more than 2.5 years since 25-year-old Shanquella Robinson died while vacationing with friends in Cabo, Mexico, and her family says that they're still fighting for answers.
They changed their names. They moved to new states. They thought the investigation into the death of a 25-year-old American daughter from Charlotte, North Carolina was over. It is not over. Her family is heartbroken. Her community is devastated. And WCNC Charlotte just obtained more than 100 pages of FBI documents in the Shanquella Robinson case that have never been made public.
But before the headlines, before the investigations, before social media turned the case into an international conversation about justice, Shanquella Robinson was a daughter, a business owner, and a young woman building a future for herself in Charlotte, North Carolina. Tonight, we are going deep into the documented timeline, the known evidence, the medical findings, and the unanswered questions that continue to surround this case. And trust me, by the time you hear how the timeline unfolded inside that villa, you will understand why people are still demanding answers years later. If you believe cases like this deserve continued attention, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Brian Crime TV, because this channel follows the details, the documents, and the developments that many people overlook. Shanquella Robinson was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. Friends and relatives described her as outgoing, ambitious, and generous. She attended Winston-Salem State University and later built businesses connected to beauty and fashion. People who knew her said she enjoyed helping others and carried herself with confidence. She was active on social media, loved traveling, and appeared to have a close group of friends around her. To her family, she was more than successful. She was dependable. Her parents spoke publicly after her death about the bond they shared with their daughter and the shock they experienced when they learned she would never return home from a vacation that was supposed to last only a few days. In late October of 2022, Shanquella traveled to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, with a group of people she knew from North Carolina. The group arrived on October 28th and checked into a luxury rental property known as Villa Linda 32, located in the Puerto Los Cabos area. Photos and videos posted online initially painted the trip as a normal vacation. The group appeared relaxed. There were drinks, music, and social media clips showing everyone settling into the villa. At first glance, nothing about the trip appeared unusual. But less than 24 hours later, Shanquella Robinson would be dead. The first version of events presented to her family was relatively simple. According to statements later discussed publicly by her parents, they were initially told that Shanquella had suffered from alcohol poisoning. The explanation suggested that she became sick during the trip and could not be saved. Her family later said they were confused by the information because they felt important details were missing from the beginning. Then the story changed completely. As news of Shanquella's death spread online, a video surfaced on social media that immediately triggered outrage across the country. The footage showed a violent altercation inside the villa. In the video, Shanquella appeared visibly vulnerable while another woman physically attacked her. Voices could be heard in the background, but no one in the room appeared to stop the fight.
Aquila, can you at least fight back?
No. What's your problem?
At least something. At least fight back, something.
Get up!
Deja Jackson began to rain.
Shanquella died. Why was her family reportedly told she suffered from alcohol poisoning? That moment transformed the case from a tragic death into an international controversy. The release of the video placed enormous pressure on authorities in both Mexico and the United States. Social media users began dissecting the timeline frame by frame. News outlets across the country picked up the story. Protesters gathered in Charlotte demanding accountability. And at the center of it all was a grieving family still trying to understand exactly what happened to their daughter in the hours before her death. As investigators in Mexico continued examining the case, more details about the medical response inside the villa began to emerge. According to reports later released by Mexican authorities and media outlets, medical assistance was requested on October 29th. A doctor arrived at the villa to evaluate Shanquella's condition. The physician reportedly found her in serious medical distress. Reports stated that she was dehydrated, unstable, and eventually became unresponsive. The timeline that followed became one of the most heavily discussed parts of the investigation. Accounts released through Mexican reporting indicated that the doctor recommended hospitalization. According to those reports, there were delays and disagreements surrounding transportation to a hospital. Eventually, emergency responders were called to the scene. By the time paramedics arrived, Shanquella Robinson could not be revived. She was pronounced dead on October 29, 2022. She was 25 years old. For her family, the loss was devastating enough, but the confusion surrounding the circumstances of her death made the situation even worse. They were now facing two realities at the same time. One version involved a sudden medical emergency tied to alcohol. The other involved a violent altercation captured on video. And then another major development emerged. Mexican authorities released findings connected to Shanquella Robinson's death certificate. According to those reports, the listed cause of death included severe spinal cord injury and atlas luxation, which refers to instability or dislocation involving the upper neck area near the skull. The document reportedly indicated that her death was not consistent with alcohol poisoning. That revelation intensified public outrage. The contradiction between the initial explanation and the medical findings became the central issue in the case. People wanted to know how such dramatically different accounts could exist at the same time. The pressure on investigators grew larger by the day. As the case gained worldwide attention, Mexican prosecutors announced that they had opened a femicide investigation. Under Mexican law, femicide refers to the killing of a woman under certain violent circumstances. Authorities in Mexico eventually issued an arrest warrant connected to the case. The announcement made international headlines. Suddenly, this was no longer just a viral social media controversy. It had become a cross-border criminal investigation involving two countries, competing medical conclusions, and intense public scrutiny. Meanwhile, back in Charlotte, Shanquella Robinson's family continued speaking publicly about their pain and frustration. Her mother, Salamondra Robinson, repeatedly called for justice and transparency. The family questioned why no arrests had been made in the United States, despite the disturbing footage that had circulated online. As public attention intensified, the people who traveled to Cabo with Shanquella largely stayed out of the public eye. Their silence fueled speculation online, but investigators and journalists continued focusing on what could actually be documented and verified. One of the reasons the case became so emotionally charged was because of the perception of betrayal surrounding the circumstances. The people inside that villa were not strangers. They were individuals Shanquella traveled with voluntarily. They laughed together before the tragedy. They shared meals. They appeared in vacation photos together. That reality made the later footage even more difficult for many people to process. May 28, 2026, 8:51 p.m., Woman of My Dreams. For Shanquella's family, the emotional damage extended far beyond the medical findings. They believed they had not received the truth in the immediate aftermath of her death. Public interviews given by her parents revealed how deeply those conflicting explanations affected them. As investigators worked through the evidence, questions continued to grow about the timeline between the altercation shown in the video and the moment emergency medical services were contacted. Online discussions became increasingly intense, with millions of people debating what may have happened during those missing hours. At the same time, legal experts began warning the public about the difference between online outrage and criminal prosecution. Even though the viral video generated enormous emotional reactions, investigators would still need evidence that met legal standards in court. That distinction would later become extremely important in the United States investigation. Months after Shanquella's death, federal investigators in the United States completed their review of the case. In April of 2023, the United States Department of Justice announced that federal prosecutors would not pursue criminal charges based on the evidence available at that time. The decision shocked many people who had followed the case closely. Federal authorities stated that available evidence did not support prosecution under federal law beyond a reasonable doubt. The announcement immediately triggered backlash online, with critics arguing that the investigation had failed to deliver accountability. But even after the Department of Justice declined prosecution, the controversy did not disappear. Instead, public interest continued growing. The disagreement between Mexican authorities and United States investigators became one of the defining aspects of the case. Mexico maintained a criminal investigation connected to the death. The United States declined to file charges. Two systems reached very different conclusions, while the Robinson family remained caught in the middle. As public frustration continued building, another factor kept the story alive. The internet never stopped talking about Shanquella Robinson. Her name continued trending across social media platforms months after her death. Content creators, legal commentators, activists, and journalists repeatedly revisited the timeline. Every new report reignited the conversation. Every interview with her family brought renewed attention. Every mention of possible legal developments triggered fresh speculation. But underneath all the headlines and debates was a very simple reality. A young woman left North Carolina for a vacation with people she trusted, and she never came home alive. That fact continued haunting people across the country. The emotional impact of the case was especially strong within Black communities online, where many viewers identified with the themes of friendship, trust, travel safety, and accountability. Discussions expanded beyond the details of the investigation itself. People began asking broader questions about group loyalty, violence among friends, and the dangers of social media culture masking real-life conflict. The villa in Cabo became symbolic of something larger than the crime scene itself. It represented unanswered questions. What happened in the hours leading up to the altercation? What caused tensions inside the group? What conversations took place after the fight ended? Why were conflicting explanations allegedly given to the family? And why did two countries examining the same death arrive at such different legal outcomes? Those questions continued following the case year after year. At the same time, legal analysts repeatedly emphasized an important point. Public suspicion and criminal proof are not the same thing. Investigators would need admissible evidence, witness cooperation, medical certainty, and prosecutable facts to secure criminal convictions. That legal burden created a major challenge in the case, especially with conflicting medical interpretations and the complications that can arise in international investigations. Still, for many people watching from the outside, the viral video remained impossible to ignore. The footage fundamentally changed how the public viewed the case. Without that video, Shanquella Robinson's death may have remained an isolated international tragedy with limited attention. Instead, the recording forced millions of people to confront the disturbing reality of what appeared to be violence inside the villa shortly before her death. That single piece of footage transformed the investigation into a worldwide story. As pressure mounted, more attention turned toward the timeline established by Mexican authorities. Reports indicated that emergency medical care was not immediate. Questions about delayed treatment became another major point of public discussion. Medical professionals interviewed by news organizations explained that in serious trauma situations, rapid intervention can be critical. Those conversations intensified public anger surrounding the case. At the same time, misinformation also spread rapidly online. False rumors, edited clips, and unsupported accusations flooded social media platforms. Some people claimed secret conspiracies existed. Others spread unverified stories about motives and hidden conflicts within the group. Investigators never publicly confirmed many of those online theories. That distinction matters. One of the biggest challenges in high-profile cases is separating verified evidence from emotionally driven speculation. And in the Shanquella Robinson case, the amount of internet commentary often overshadowed the confirmed facts. The documented evidence established several key realities. Shanquella Robinson traveled to Cabo with a group of acquaintances. A violent altercation was captured on video. She later died inside the villa. Mexican medical findings identified serious neck and spinal injuries. Mexican prosecutors pursued a criminal investigation. United States federal prosecutors later declined charges based on the evidence available to them. Everything beyond those established points became heavily debated territory. Even so, the emotional power of the case remained undeniable. The image of Shanquella smiling in vacation photos before the tragedy contrasted sharply with the global outrage that followed afterward. Her family's grief became visible to millions of viewers through interviews and public statements. The unanswered questions surrounding her final hours continued fueling demands for accountability. As months turned into years, the Robinson family continued pushing for justice publicly. Their determination kept the case in the public eye long after many viral stories would normally fade away. And then came another development that reignited attention once again. Civil legal action connected to the case brought renewed focus to the timeline, the relationships between the individuals involved, and the events inside the villa. Court proceedings reopened discussions about the evidence and the handling of the investigation. Public interest surged again as people searched for updates and possible breakthroughs. By that point, the Shanquella Robinson case had evolved into something much larger than a single news cycle. It became a symbol of unresolved justice in the eyes of many supporters. The story also highlighted the growing role of social media in modern criminal investigations. In earlier decades, a case like this may have received temporary local coverage before fading away. But the digital age changed everything. Videos spread globally within hours. Public pressure escalated instantly. Online communities conducted their own timeline analysis in real time. International attention forced authorities to respond publicly. Whether that pressure helped or complicated the investigation depends on who you ask. May 28, 2026, 8:51 p.m. Woman of my dreams. Some legal experts argued that social media kept critical attention on the case and prevented it from being forgotten. Others warned that online speculation risked contaminating public understanding of the evidence. But one thing is certain. Without public attention, the case would not have reached the level of international visibility it ultimately achieved. For the Robinson family, visibility mattered because visibility meant people still cared. And years later, many people still do. Even now, the name Shanquella Robinson continues appearing in discussions about travel safety, friendship violence, international investigations, and accountability. The emotional reaction surrounding the case has never fully disappeared because the core circumstances remain deeply disturbing to many observers. A young woman traveled with people she trusted. A violent incident occurred. Contradictory explanations followed. Medical findings raised further questions. Investigators in 2 countries reached different conclusions, and a grieving family was left searching for answers in front of the entire world. That is why the case continues generating headlines years later. As we move deeper into this investigation, the focus shifts towards the growing legal battles, the FBI records connected to the case, the continued demands from the Robinson family, and the developments that brought the story back into public conversation years after Shanquella Robinson's death. Because according to attorneys, investigators, and newly discussed court filings, the controversy surrounding this case may be far from over. And what surfaced next only added more questions to an investigation already surrounded by controversy. If you want continued coverage on cases like this, make sure you subscribe to Brian Crime TV and turn on notifications so you never miss future updates as we continue breaking down the details behind the headlines. For years, one word has stood at the center of the Shanquella Robinson case: undetermined. That single conclusion changed the direction of the investigation in the United States and became one of the most painful points of frustration for Shanquella Robinson's family. Because by that stage, the public had already seen the viral video from inside the villa. Mexican authorities had already released medical findings connected to severe neck and spinal injuries. A criminal investigation in Mexico was already moving forward. Yet in the United States, federal prosecutors later announced they would not pursue charges based on the evidence available to them at the time. That divide between 2 countries created a storm of confusion that still surrounds this case today. On one side, Mexican investigators treated the death as a possible criminal act tied to violence. On the other side, the United States Department of Justice stated in April of 2023 that prosecutors had determined the available evidence did not support federal criminal charges beyond a reasonable doubt. For the Robinson family, those 2 conclusions felt impossible to reconcile. Shanquella Robinson's father, Bernard Robinson, publicly questioned how a case involving a violent altercation captured on video could end without criminal charges in the United States. Like many people following the investigation, the family struggled to understand how 2 systems reviewing the same tragedy reached such different legal outcomes. And that disagreement became one of the defining realities of the entire case. The medical timeline played a major role in that conflict. According to reporting from Mexican authorities, Shanquella Robinson's autopsy was conducted shortly after her death in Cabo San Lucas. The findings released by officials referenced severe spinal cord trauma and atlas luxation involving the neck area. Those findings became central to the Mexican investigation. In the United States, however, additional medical review occurred later after Shanquella's body had been transported internationally. Federal authorities ultimately announced that available evidence did not support criminal prosecution under federal law. That distinction between medical interpretations fueled years of public debate. Some supporters of the Robinson family pointed to the Mexican findings as evidence that the death involved violent trauma. Others emphasize that federal prosecutors are required to meet an extremely high legal standard before filing criminal charges. And because investigators never publicly released every piece of evidence reviewed during the federal process, the disagreement surrounding the case only intensified. As public frustration grew, the individuals who traveled to Cabo with Shanquella Robinson largely remained out of public view. Social media accounts connected to some members of the group reportedly became inactive or less visible after the case exploded online. Public attention surrounding the investigation became so intense that many of the people connected to the trip were identified and discussed constantly across social media platforms. The online reaction was enormous. Millions of people followed updates connected to the investigation. Protesters marched in Charlotte demanding justice for Shanquella Robinson. Content creators analyzed the timeline repeatedly. National news organizations continued revisiting the case, and every new development reignited debate surrounding what truly happened during the final hours inside Villa Linda 32. Reports later circulated online that one of the individuals widely identified in connection with the assault video had legally changed her name after the case received national attention. Public records discussions surrounding that issue quickly spread online and became another source of controversy and speculation. But despite the intense emotions surrounding the case, legal experts repeatedly warned that public suspicion alone is not enough to establish criminal liability in court. May 28, 2026, 9:06 p.m. Woman of my dreams. Investigators would still need admissible evidence capable of meeting the burden required for prosecution. That legal reality remained one of the biggest obstacles in the case from the very beginning. At the same time, the emotional weight of the situation never faded for the Robinson family. Public interviews given by Shanquella Robinson's parents showed the lasting pain created by the unanswered questions surrounding their daughter's death. They continued speaking publicly, continued attending events honoring Shanquella's memory, and continued pushing for accountability years after the initial investigation began. And as the criminal investigation stalled in the United States, another legal path slowly started taking shape. The Robinson family turned towards civil litigation. That move shifted the case into an entirely new phase. Unlike criminal court proceedings, civil wrongful death lawsuits operate under a different legal standard. Instead of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, civil proceedings focus on whether available evidence supports liability under a lower evidentiary threshold known as the preponderance of evidence standard. That distinction became extremely important as the case evolved. By early 2026, renewed public attention focused on reports that the wrongful death lawsuit connected to the Shanquella Robinson case had advanced into Mecklenburg County Superior Court in Charlotte, North Carolina. For supporters of the family, that development represented something they had waited years to see: movement. The significance of Charlotte becoming the center of the legal proceedings carried emotional weight for many people following the case. Charlotte was Shanquella Robinson's home city. It was where she built her businesses. It was where her family continued living. It was where protests demanding justice had taken place after her death. And now, years later, the legal fight connected to her case was unfolding there as well. Around the same period, renewed attention also focused on FBI records connected to the investigation after reporting indicated that WCNC Charlotte had obtained more than 100 pages of investigative documents tied to the case. That revelation immediately reignited public interest. People wanted to know what information existed inside those records. They wanted to understand how investigators approached the timeline. They wanted answers regarding witness interviews, communications, and evidence collection. And because many details from the federal investigation had never been fully discussed publicly, the release of document-related reporting triggered another wave of scrutiny online. Still, important limitations remained. Not every investigative detail becomes public. Not every rumor circulating online is accurate. And not every allegation discussed on social media can be verified through official records. That distinction continued mattering as the case attracted millions of opinions across the internet. At its core, the legal battle connected to Shanquella Robinson's death now centered around several unresolved questions. What exactly happened during the hours between the altercation inside the villa and the emergency medical response? What conversations took place among the individuals present during that period? Why were conflicting explanations reportedly given to the Robinson family after Shanquella's death? And how would those issues be addressed in civil court proceedings moving forward? Those questions remained central to the continuing public fascination with the case. Another major factor keeping attention on the investigation was the emotional symbolism attached to friendship and trust. The story disturbed so many people because it involved a group vacation among individuals who knew each other personally. Viewers across the country imagined themselves in similar situations with their own friends. That emotional relatability made the case especially powerful online. Many supporters of the Robinson family viewed the civil lawsuit as an opportunity for testimony, questioning, and discovery that might reveal additional information about the events inside the villa. Legal analysts noted that civil proceedings can sometimes uncover details that never emerge publicly during criminal investigations. That possibility created another wave of anticipation surrounding the case. At the same time, attorneys and commentators continued emphasizing that all individuals connected to the case remained presumed innocent unless proven otherwise in court. No criminal charges had been filed in the United States. The Mexican arrest warrant remained unresolved, and the civil proceedings represented allegations requiring legal examination rather than criminal convictions. That legal distinction remained critical throughout every public discussion surrounding the case. As years passed, the story of Shanquella Robinson evolved beyond a single investigation. It became part of larger conversations involving international justice, violence among acquaintances, online activism, and the influence of social media on modern criminal cases. The internet played a massive role in keeping the case alive. Without the viral video, the death may never have received worldwide attention. Without the constant online pressure, many people believe public interest would have faded quickly. Instead, the case remained visible year after year through documentaries, interviews, legal updates, and ongoing activism demanding accountability. For Shanquella Robinson's family, that visibility mattered deeply because it meant their daughter would not be forgotten. And in many ways, memory became one of the central themes of the entire story. Even after the initial headlines slowed down, Shanquella's name continued appearing online. Community events honored her life. Supporters continued posting tributes. Protesters continued demanding answers. And each new legal development brought renewed focus to the unresolved questions surrounding her death. By 2026, the narrative surrounding the case had shifted again. The focus was no longer only on what happened inside the villa. Attention increasingly centered on what might happen next inside a courtroom. Supporters of the Robinson family believed the civil proceedings could finally force difficult questions into the open. Legal experts discussed the possibility of sworn testimony and evidence review connected to the wrongful death allegations. Public interest intensified as people waited to see whether years of online debate would finally transition into formal courtroom examination. For many observers, the lawsuit represented the first major legal momentum in years. At the same time, the international dimension of the case continued complicating public understanding. Mexican authorities maintained their criminal position connected to the investigation. The United States government maintained its prosecutorial decision, and the unresolved gap between those systems continued fueling frustration among supporters seeking accountability. That tension between two legal systems remained one of the most unique aspects of the Shanquella Robinson case. One country pursued criminal allegations connected to violent trauma. Another country concluded that federal criminal prosecution was not supported under the available evidence. Meanwhile, a grieving family continued navigating the emotional consequences of both decisions at the same time. And throughout all of it, public attention never completely disappeared. The reason this case continues resonating with so many people is because the central facts remain emotionally unsettling. A young woman traveled out of the country with people she knew personally. A violent altercation later surfaced publicly. Conflicting explanations followed. Medical findings generated international controversy. And years later, major questions still remain unresolved. That combination keeps the story alive. May 28th, 2026, 9:06 p.m. Woman of my dreams. As more attention turned toward the civil proceedings, the public conversation increasingly focused on accountability through testimony and documentation rather than online speculation. Analysts emphasize that courtroom proceedings operate differently from social media debates. Claims must be supported. Evidence must be examined carefully. Allegations face legal scrutiny. That process, supporters hoped, could eventually provide clearer answers than the internet ever could. Meanwhile, Shanquella Robinson's parents continued speaking publicly about their daughter and the lasting impact of her death. Their persistence became one of the emotional foundations of the case. Years after losing their daughter, they continued attending interviews, participating in public events, and advocating for continued attention surrounding the investigation. For many supporters, that determination became symbolic of the broader fight for accountability. And as the civil lawsuit moved forward, the possibility of future developments kept growing. Would additional investigative records become public? Would sworn testimony reveal new details about the timeline?
Shanquella Robinson died while vacationing with friends in Cabo, Mexico, and her family says that they're still fighting for answers.
One thing, however, has remained consistent from the beginning. Shanquella Robinson's name has never disappeared from public memory. Her story continues being discussed because the emotional and legal questions surrounding her death remain unresolved in the eyes of many supporters. The combination of the viral video, the international investigation, the conflicting medical conclusions, and the continuing legal proceedings transformed the case into one of the most widely discussed true crime stories of recent years. And even now, the story is still evolving. The wrongful death lawsuit connected to the case remains active. The Mexican arrest warrant connected to the investigation remains unresolved publicly. No criminal charges have been filed in the United States, and public attention surrounding the case continues whenever new developments emerge. For the Robinson family, the fight has always been about more than headlines. It has been about their daughter. A daughter, they say, should have returned home safely from a vacation. A daughter whose life became the center of an international controversy. And a daughter whose name continues echoing through courtrooms, investigations, documentaries, and public conversations years after her death. If you have followed the Shanquella Robinson case from the beginning and want continued coverage on future legal developments, updates, and investigative reporting connected to this story, make sure you subscribe to Brian Crime TV and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter in this ongoing case.